And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO at Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is William Arruda, who is an old friend. He is a speaker. He is an author. He is a personal branding pioneer. And we'll get into that in a couple of minutes. And instead of spending a lot of time reading his bio, which would take up half the show, I'm just going to dive right in because I'm really, really excited about our call. So welcome aboard. Thanks for taking time out today, William.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here, Peter. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, cool. So everybody's got sort of their flashlight, their that story, right? And I think what's really, really cool about the world that we live in, authors, speakers, thought leaders, et cetera, is it's typically the path is not linear, the path is not deliberate, it's the proverbial X happens, right? And then after that, life changes. So for you, and you and I were reconnecting a couple of weeks ago, and I could clearly remember when I got the copy of Fast Company with a brand U that looked like the Tide logo. That was amazing. So tell us, you obviously had a stronger reaction to it than I did. I loved it. I was so delighted to actually have Tom Peters on the podcast a couple of months ago. It was like, wow, I think I should just hang up my microphone because, where else do we go from there? But so what did that do for you?
Yeah, well, first I want to say you always have the big stars, so you made me feel really important by having me on your show. So I can bump shoulders with all these really important people. I will tell you this is the thing.
Bill Clinton today, so he called in sick.
People always confuse us. I've got to tell you, come all the time. So yeah, this is the coolest thing that ever happened. I actually was working for IBM in branding. I absolutely loved my job. I loved working for the man. I really did. I didn't think I would be an entrepreneur ever. And then there was that article, The Brand Called You, by Tom Peters in Fast Company on my assistant's desk. And I needed a little break. I picked it up. I read the article and I put the magazine down and said, I am going to start the first ever personal branding company. And literally, I did. Actually, no, can I tell you, honestly, I didn't. So I thought I was going to. And then what happened was the next week, my manager said to me, hey, they need someone to run branding in Europe. Do you want to go to Europe? And so I was thinking, go to Europe, start my own company, go to Europe. So I went to Europe. And then finally, I was living in Paris. I quit my job. I quit IBM and I started my business there. And there were already 4 other people doing it. The good news for me is there was no business in personal branding. So those 4 people quickly left the field and I was left there by myself, which gives me the claim to fame of having been in the field longer than anyone else.
Which is amazing. So, okay, so you launch your company, you're in Paris. So my question for you is, I want to take this in a little direction before we go back to that in a minute. So when I had Tom on, when I interviewed him, we got into a little conversation. And if you've ever interacted with Tom, they tend to get really heated really quickly, even if it's a not necessarily controversial issue. He's a pretty passionate guy, to say the least. So my hypothesis, and I'd love for you to confirm or deny it or push back or whatever, is that personal branding is great. And when that came out in the late 90s, it was a game changer. However, the early days of personal branding was about, how do I stand out, right? How do I look different? How do I stand out from the crowd? And it was everything from Peter's a guy that wears a bow tie, or Peter's the guy that wears goofy socks or whatever. And that's all fine and dandy, because in the absence of nobody else doing any of these things, at least you'd remember, oh, Peter wears purple socks, whatever. I believe, and I'm biased, that thought leadership is sort of the next level of personal branding, where it's not just a physical attribute, a quirk, or you're the guy that brings the cinnamon donuts to the office, but your thought leadership is really, really the penultimate in personal branding. And it's aligned when you're at an organization and then goes with you down the road. So how does that resonate or repulse?
No. You're absolutely right. I will say that most people, if they weren't the CEO or a thought leader in a certain specific area, didn't do anything about thought leadership. It was just not even expected, right? If you were somehow working in any organization, even if you were, your own boss. Today, if you really want a brand, you need to identify that thought leadership, and within that area of expertise, your specific point of view. And that is what your brand is really built around. And, in addition to the things that separate you from everyone else, and the superpowers that make you stand out because you're so good at them, and things like that.
Cool. So high five. We're in violent agreement. I love it. Here we go. So you start your company. Now, again, this is like 100 years ago in internet world. This is like what, '01 or something? And you're,
Exactly. '01. Yeah.
yeah. So you're like the personal branding dude in 2001. And what does that look like? What is it that you do? Who do you serve? How do you make a living at that?
Well, I'll tell you, the make a living part was really hard. And in fact, it was really a rude awakening for me. I was on an expat package from IBM. They paid for
Sure.
my apartment, my meals, my business class trips home whenever I wanted to, stock and options and all this. I went from that to
But I need the
literally,
violinist. Cue the violin.
and then but I went to literally $0 for about 18 months. I will tell you, I sold my stock and my options and my
Sure.
savings and my 401k. And so the great news about that, as much as it was incredibly painful and it was really hard to live through, was it helped me develop my thought leadership, my intellectual property, my methodology for personal branding. And I frankly started just working with CEOs. They were the only people who got the message and understood and really felt they needed a brand in the marketplace to be able to connect with all their stakeholders. So that was kind of the initial.
So you're lucky in that the early adopters happen to be C-level. If the early adopters didn't have budget, couldn't do things on a discretionary level, et cetera, it may have been a different story. I want to go back to something that you brushed on, because a lot of people either don't do this, fast forward through it, or don't really understand and appreciate and respect the importance of the frameworks, the models, the thought leadership, because there are folks out there that could live on their charisma and their charm and their good looks. Not that you're not any of those things. But when you've got the frameworks and the methodology, just talk about how critical that's been for you for 20 years.
Yeah, I will tell you, it is. It's probably the most valuable. But besides me and my passion for the topic,
Sure.
it's the most valuable asset I have, without question. And in fact, you know what? My methodology is one of the things I did. I developed a certification program for coaches to be able to learn my methodology and apply it. So now that methodology, the 3-step process, has been literally used by millions of people around the world. And where
So
go
stay,
ahead.
but I want to stay there for a minute, because it's so important. It's like, okay, that's scale, right? Millions of people have been through it, and it's not millions of people have seen William as a speaker. That might be great. I mean, it's probably tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands that have, but being able to break down what you do and how you do it into the Lego pieces, the molecular level, so it can be reassembled and moved into the developing the capabilities in others. I don't think a lot of people really appreciate how hard that is. And to your point, like you said, it's your number one asset. So talk about that for a bit, if you could.
Yeah, and I will tell you, here's the thing. Everyone has thought leadership. They don't know that they have it, right? And most people don't pursue it. And every organization needs everyone in their organization thinking about it. What's my thought leadership, my point of view, and how does that deliver value for me and for my company, right? That's why I think a lot of the work that you're doing is so powerful, and so it's really today. It's where companies need to be if they want to be successful. The the thing about having a process, a methodology, a structure, whatever you want to call it, IP, is number one, it allows you to do things in a repeatable way. It
Right.
allows you to talk about what you do and your differentiation in a way that's meaningful and understandable by those you connect with, which is really powerful. And it gives you, as you're building your thought leadership, right? So I look at my methodology, right? It's a 3-step process, but in step 1, there are 2 components. And in each of those components, there are all these things. It gives you a way of delivering value and communicating, because you can pull this apart. And one day I can talk about, one of the 6 drivers of the introspective part of personal branding is values. And so today I can talk all about values and what they mean and why they're important at work. And so by having this methodology, it gives you the fodder or the outline of kinds of content that you can use to start to build visibility, to increase the value you deliver to others, and to make
And it also puts constraints on, because if someone were to ask you a same or similar question around the values piece as it relates to personal branding 6 months, a year, or 2 years from now, your mind's going to go back to the methodology. You might not have a verbatim, literal, whatever, but it will be of the same DNA, as opposed to, oh, well, it depends what Bill had for breakfast that day, or it depends what was ever was going on there. So that's interesting. If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com www.constancy.com/podcasts. Let's talk about the business model. So going back to the beginning, you're coaching, advising, and working with CEOs. They dig it. The timing's right. You're in the right place, right time. You're smart. You put your proverbial sign out, whatever. Now it's moved. So now you're in a totally different business. Tell me about the businesses that you're in. So there's the obvious. You're an author. You get paid, a couple pennies to write a book, right? You're a speaker. Yeah, you're a speaker. Remember when that was a thing? That was so quaint. That was pretty good thing. What are the various moving pieces of the Arruda empire?
Oh boy, empire, nice word. Probably the first time ever referred to that way. I'll remember you forever, Peter. Here's the thing. This is the other benefit of having thought leadership: diversification. Right. Once you have this,
you're talking about from the business perspective,
from a business perspective, and even if you're inside an organization, right, you can think about, this is my intellectual property. How do I do this in another part of the organization, or how do I deliver value? Right. So it gives you all these legs, right, and to be able to make things happen. And so I started just doing the CEO coaching. And then I moved to certifying coaches, and we have 1,000 coaches who work with thousands of people all over the world. Then I built what was not available was an assessment so that people could understand their brand from the outside in.
Yep.
And it's really important. You need to validate your self-perceptions with external feedback, because your brand is really held in the hearts and minds of those who know you. Sure. So I created a product, 360 Reach, right, which now we've had 1.8 million people use. And it helps them understand their brand from the outside in. So again, it's one little element of my overall personal branding methodology, but I'm able to build products around it. Now I have a new bot that takes you through personal branding on your phone with little reminders and nudges. And so it's the same exact method. This is the thing I tell everyone: once you develop your thought leadership, the approach you need to do is be lazy. You just keep taking that same stuff and applying it to different people. I work at all levels of the organization now, not just CEOs.
I love that, because I think a mistake that a lot of thought leaders make, partly because they're creative, partly because they're intrinsically motivated. There's lots of reasons. Is I got to create something new. Like I talk to a new client, it's like, here's the book I'm working on, and here's the next 7. And it's like, whoa, back up. Like, you are in the real estate business and you like the part about building homes, but not the part about renting them or selling them. You'd be bankrupt quickly. In the thought leadership space, you might not be bankrupt, but you investing in that assessment, and 1.8 million people have taken that, and I'm assuming many of them paid, and it's led to other things, et cetera, et cetera. And it's based on a methodology that you built years and years ago. That's leverage. This is what we do every day, is say, work with our clients, say, how do you leverage your thought leadership? Not how do you create an abundance and drown people in it, but how do you leverage solid ideas?
And I'm so glad you say that. And that's exactly what it needs to be. And by the way, no one's even heard. So I have a Forbes column, and I publish all kinds of stuff, right? And 99% of the people in the world have never heard one piece of it, right? You put something up on LinkedIn, and only 2% of your followers ever even connect with it, because they have to be looking at your feed or their feed, right? Yeah. So I think a lot of people, they get bored, or they think other people are bored with their thought leadership, and they really aren't. So you really need to. Repetition is key. We know from Ebbinghaus, right? The psychologist, the German psychologist, that 60 days after we learn something, 90% of us have completely forgotten it. So you really need to be out there repeating yourself, and then taking it to the next level, right? I'm not still doing personal branding the way I did in 2001. The process is the same, but when we move to thought leadership and how you make that thought leadership visible, right now we have social media. Now we have different tools. How do
you've
people?
Got an app. You have different ways to deliver it, and that's the other piece, is that oftentimes thought leaders are stuck in a modality because that's where they're comfortable, right? So if I'm a writer, I write. You can say, well, I'm an author. I'm a columnist. I'm great. And then, but you could also say, but I've actually developed an app, right? And that might be, oh, geez, that's scary. Or, short form video is critically important now as a way to get things out. And sometimes people are like, oh, I hate the sound of my voice, or the, whatever on video. But it's like, you've got to be able to get out there in all the modalities, or as many as are appropriate for your work, to get that message out there. Because even now, 20 years later, the percentage of the universe that has no idea about your work or you is still far, far, far greater than those that do know it.
Exactly. And And the great news is it means you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So if I go and deliver a talk about personal branding, I can then take the content that's in those slides and make it an article. And I can pull little pieces of that and make them into tweets. I can take little clips from that presentation I just delivered and make those 2-minute YouTube videos. So I've done something once, and I've used all these different media and these different platforms to be able to amplify the visibility while saying the same thing. Because we know in branding, clarity, consistency, constancy, right? Be clear about who you are and who you're not. Always be that, and always be visible to the people who are making decisions about you. And when you create stuff once and you kind of repeat yourself all the time, you're ticking the box next to the 3 C's.
Yep. So I want to just push a little bit into, COVID's been thrust upon us, right? It's been a long, long time. The end is maybe in sight. We think there's light at the end of the tunnel. It could be a train coming at us. It could be light. Who knows? How does sort of the COVID coming into hopefully a post-COVID world change personal branding? What I mean is, I'm sure you can say the principles are the same, but like, for example, you and I are talking on video now. We're only playing this on audio, and I can see, your background. There's beautiful art. It's stylish. It's centered. The lighting's good. It lines up to sort of what I expect from William, right? It's, if you were sitting in a schlocky looking pub or something like that, or it was noisy or whatever, I wouldn't expect that. But how do we think about, or how should we start thinking about our personal branding in this Zoom world that we're all thrust into and staying in, I guess?
Yeah. And, I will tell you the number one skill people need to have right now is understanding how to use video. Every single meeting people are having is in video. Yep. If you're presenting to clients, you're presenting via video. And this isn't going to go away. We know that there will be the office, the home, and the third place, and we'll spend our time among those places, which means that there's always going to be some people who are going to be need to be on video. And so if you need to build one skill, you need to get that stuff right. And so again, it's the same thing. It's personal branding, but now how do I deliver my brand? How am I compelling and engaging and magnetic in this new virtual world when people are looking at me in a 13-inch screen, right? You're not standing in front of them in the meeting room. You're not engaging on a human level. The screen is a scrim that dilutes your humanity, right? So you need to actually amp up how, right? Even though your credentials are important, you need to amp up the humanity so that you can connect with people on a human emotional level. So these are the kinds of things. And I know video is something that you work on with your clients, right? Around how do you create video to demonstrate your thought leadership? And by doing that, you build the skills to be good on video. You know where to position yourself in the screen. You know to have the light coming at you. You know you need clear audio, right? I see you have your big fancy $10 million mic there that you're using right now, which is why you sound so good. And those are the things that they're now like they used to be kind of nice to have, being really good at video. Now they're the table stakes to being a successful, acknowledged, respected professional.
Yeah, interesting stuff. So as we start to land the plane or run out of time here, if you were to send a message to someone out there now that's maybe not in the corporate pad in Paris with the big expense account, whatever, but there is a William out there now who's thinking about making the leap about something into the world of thought leadership, what might you advise them to do or not do?
Well, the first thing I'd advise them, this is the biggest lesson I've learned. And I learned this from Faith Popcorn. Do you know Faith Popcorn?
Yeah,
the futurist. And I absolutely love her.
Brother-in-law too. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Well, she once said this. She said, most people walk around every day and things happen. And if the things don't kind of correspond to their normal way of being, they say, that's weird, and they discard it. And she said, what I do is all these weird things happen. I think, that's weird. Store it. And when you do this, you are developing like that's how if I had said, wow, that's a really interesting article by Tom Peters, and put it down and then just went back to my work, you and I wouldn't be talking today, and everything would be different. And so the first step is really to pay attention, because if you're going to do this, you want to build it around something. What
are you drawn to? What's occupying space in your brain? Why is it?
And why do you let your brain, like if you let your brain do that, then you can make it happen. And then be willing to invest the time, but time and money. I think, and I'm not saying this because I'm looking for clients to do personal branding with, but invest time in building your thought leadership and demonstrating it. One of the things people don't do today, and this is really anachronistic because you didn't need to invest in your career when you in the 1950s. Today, we are running our own companies, whether we're working inside a company or and we need to invest in that company for it to be
even
successful.
as an IBMer, I mean, any IBMer, if there's a young William today that's an IBMer, they're thinking of that more as a gig than the maybe even when you started, it might have been, not unlikely that I might spend 40 years here, get the gold watch, and life would be good. Like those days are over. Like that's not the world we live in.
And yeah, a lot of people are still acting like that's the case. Like if I work in the company, they kind of take care of my career for me. But if I'm working for myself, maybe I have to do some stuff. And I think some of the work that you're doing inside companies, you're giving people this opportunity to be like, I'm delivering extra value here because I have my thought leadership. Absolutely. I'm delivering great value, and I'm building an asset that I can use if I'm going to move and do something on my own. And we know that people are going to go back and forth, right? They're going to work for themselves and then go back into a company. So I just think that looking at your career as this investment and spending the time, the money, the energy, the effort, building the connections.
And the thinking.
Yeah. Sitting back and thinking. Yeah.
Thank you
so it's good to make no money, right? So if you have no money, you have time to be able to invest.
Well, and then you can make a lot of money. But thank you so much for sharing with us today, William. I've been a fan of your work for a long time, and it was great to have you on today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It was always fun chatting with you.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.